seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted.
When you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David, why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
After having a catastrophically terrible debate with Trump, constantly stumbling his words and blankly staring off into space, Biden now takes part in a sit-down interview to try and quell the fears of the public. In this video, I'm going to use my skills as a body language analyst to try to see what's really going on with Joe Biden.
Mr. President, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night, but your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked if they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection.
Biden does what's called the smile mask here. When the disastrous debate is brought up, he knows just how awful it was, and this causes him extreme amounts of emotional stress. So he masks it by smiling. Ross and JJ conducted a study in 1998 regarding emotional regulation, which found that people employ various strategies, such as smiling, as a way to regulate their stress. Biden smiles as a socially acceptable form of venting stress. When responding, claiming that it was simply a bad episode, he then does what's called prolonged blinking. This is a form of distancing behavior, which we do as a method of protecting ourselves. It is typically a response to a mental overload or stress, where the body momentarily disengages to cope with an increased mental demand, causing the length of the blink to increase. Orchard and Stern in 1991 conducted a study which found that prolonged blinking is typically a response to a mental overload or stress where the body momentarily disengages to cope with an increased mental demand, causing the length of the blink to increase. He does this here, indicating he's experiencing significant cognitive load when trying to answer the question. Unfortunately, he does this frequently, which contributes to the view that he's not competent to lead. He does it at the end as well when talking about the doctors. Also, when pressed about recovery times, he does a distancing behavior with his body, changing his proxemics to move away from the stressor, which in this case is the journalist. We naturally try to move away from things that cause us stress, and he does this here, showing that he feels almost attacked by the question.
You know, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is, what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look. The whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, you know, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, no one else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
After saying it was simply a bad cold, which is a blatant lie, he then tenses his mouth and lips. This is muscle tension, which suggests that he may not be being entirely truthful here. Ekman and Friesen in 1969 conducted a study titled Nonverbal Leakage and Clues to Deception, which found that behaviors expressing muscle tension, such as a clenched fist or tight jaw, can indicate elevated anxiety levels or discomfort. When we lie, we generate stress for ourselves, as the brain naturally fears the repercussions of being caught out in a lie. Thus it triggers the stress response, and we see signs of this here with his muscle tension. Another thing to note is that he's giving off what's commonly referred to as the vacant stare. This is unfortunately a telltale sign of dementia. dementia. A study conducted in 2016 by Dr. Gojon Bu at the Mayo Clinic found that Alzheimer's patients typically express this vacant behavior as a result of an abnormal buildup of protein in the brain, reducing functionality. This leads to a distant, unfocused gaze, which Biden does regularly. Neurotypical people respond to others with their body language, especially when they're listening. They may nod their head, smile, or do the head tilt to signify their attentiveness and alertness. This is part of the natural rapport building process that we all do. Biden does none of this, which is why he's been criticized so heavily. He just acts off, even compared to himself only a number of years ago, which heavily indicates cognitive decline, and in my view, dementia. He then stumbles incoherently over his words constantly and expresses numerous signs of cognitive overload.
Well, I just had a bad night. You've had some bad interviews once in a while. I can't remember any, but I'm sure you did.
I've had plenty. I guess the question, the problem is here for a lot of Americans watching is you've said, going back to 2020, watch me, to people who are concerned about your age. And, 50 million Americans watched that debate. It seemed to confirm fears they already had.
Well, look, after that debate, I did 10 major events in a row, including till 2 o'clock in the morning after that debate. I did events in North Carolina. I did events in Georgia. Did events like this today. Large crowds, overwhelming response, no slipping. And so I just had a bad night. I don't know why.
And how quickly did it come to you that you were having that bad night?
Well, it came to me as having a bad night when I realized that even when I was answering a question, even though they turned his mic off, he was still shouting. And I let it distract me. I'm not blaming it on that. But I realized that I just wasn't in control.
When trying to recall the events he's been to, he again shows massive signs of cognitive overload with his constant prolonged blinking. He's struggling to recall what he got up to only a handful of days ago. This is again sadly one of the telltale signs of dementia. He also now claims not to know why he had such a bad night, yet before he claimed that it was because of jet lag, which was completely proven wrong, and then because of his supposed cold. It's just incoherent.
But part of the other concern is that this seems to have fit into a pattern of decline that has been reported on recently. New York Times had a headline on July 2nd, Biden's lapses are said to be increasingly common and worrisome. Here's what they wrote. People who have spent time with President Biden over the last few months or so said the lapses appear to have grown more frequent, more pronounced, and after Thursday's debate, more worrisome. By many accounts, as evidenced by video footage, observation, and interviews, Mr. Biden is not the same today as he was even when he took office 3.5 years ago. Similar reporting in the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. Are you the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes. I also was the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. I was also the guy that expanded NATO. I was also the guy that grew the economy. All the individual things that were done were ideas I had or I fulfilled. I moved on.
Biden again does the smile mask when the interviewer brings up that he's showing a strong pattern of decline. He does this again as a method of emotional regulation whilst also appearing socially acceptable. Biden must know that he's in cognitive decline. He has constant access to doctors and specialists, and even has someone who prepares him a special card to remind him what he needs to do in a simple meet and greet with the press. What I find strange is that no one ever makes reference to the dementia allegations, nor does the interviewer ask him directly about this. It's as if they have banned the word from ever being spoken in an interview. He could so easily destroy any speculation by simply performing a general practitioner assessment of cognition test, or the SAGE test in America. These are standardized screening tests for dementia that could be conducted in no more than 15 minutes and would put all of this to bed pretty much instantly. But he hasn't done this. Instead, they've held countless press conferences providing excuses as to why he did so poorly. Simply sit him down, make him do a test, and then publish the test. It's as simple as that. Instead, they let the entire American population and most of the world speculate and worry that their leader is senile, whilst also risking losing an election to Trump. When the interviewer is stating that numerous people attest to observing his cognitive decline, Biden shows extreme signs of muscle tension in the mouth. He tented it up and again continues to express the vacant gaze. It's clear the question generates extreme levels of stress for him, and when he answers, he completely and utterly ignores what the guy just said and talks about his successes. The clock is ticking against Biden. Dementia is sadly a progressive illness and will only get worse. If he wins the election again, there is no way that he will get to the end of his term without his decline being extremely obvious. It makes you wonder who is really pulling the strings behind the scenes. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.